They're assuming Gen AI can replace a lot of strong engineers. Gen AI is great in terms of writing a lot of monotonic code we have. They're great for prototyping. They're great for writing agents. They're great for automating some routine, mundane tasks and make your product agentic too. But the thing is, there's a lot of difference between showing this initial prototype and productionizing. Enterprise customers have very high bar. They don't want something that breaks at scalability or reliability in production. While LLM and agentic worlds offer a lot of fancy ways of doing things, you still need a solid engineering design practices to make sure that your product does not break in production.
Hi everyone, this is Kovid back with another episode of groCTO by Typo. Today with us we have a very special guest who is an expert in AI and machine learning. So we're going to talk a lot about GenAI engineering management with him. But let me quickly introduce Suresh to all of you. Hi Suresh.
Hello.
So Suresh is an engineering director at Eightfold, and he holds a postgraduate degree in AI and machine learning from USC. And he has almost 10 to 12 years of experience in engineering and leadership. So today, Suresh, we are grateful to have you here. And before we get started onto the main section, which is engineering management in the age of Gen AI, we would love to know a little bit more about you, maybe your hobbies, something inspiring from your life that defined who you are today. So if you could just take the stage and tell us something about yourself that your LinkedIn profile doesn't tell.
Okay, so thanks, Kovid, for having me. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so if I have to recall few incidents, I'll probably recall one or two, right? So right from my childhood, I was not an outstanding student. Let me put it that way. I have a record of failing every subject until 10th grade, right? So I'm a totally different person. I feel sometimes that gave me a lot of confidence in life because at very early age I was uh, exposed to what a failure means or how does being in failure for very long time mean, right? That kind of gave me a lot of mental stability or courage to face failures, right? I've seen a lot of friends who were outstanding students right from the beginning, and they get shaken aback when they see a setback or a failure in life, right? So I feel that defined my personality to take aggressive decisions and moves in my life. That's one thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And the second thing is, uh, during undergrad, we went to a program called NetTech. So it's organized by a very famous person in India. It's mostly an educational thing, right? Around cybersecurity and ethical hacking. So I kind of met the country's brightest minds in this program. All people from all sorts of background came to this program, mostly the good ones, right? So it kind of helped me calibrate where I am across the country's talent and gave me a fresh perspective of looking beyond my current institution, etc. Right. So these are two life defining moments for me in terms of my career growth.
Perfect, perfect. I think you become more resilient when you've seen failures. And I think the openness to learn and exposure definitely gives you a perspective that takes you in your career, not linearly, but it gives you a geometric progression, probably, or exponential progression in your life. So, totally relate to that and great start to this. So, Suresh, I think today, now we can jump onto the main section and talk more about AI, implementation of AI, agent AI. But again, that is something that I would like to touch upon little later. First,
Sure.
I would want to understand from your journey. You are an engineering director, uh, and you have spent good enough time in this management and moving from management to the senior management or a leadership position, I would say. What's your perspective of engineering management in today's world? How is it evolving? What are the things that you see uh, are kind of set as ideas in in engineering management, but might not be very right. So just throw some light on your journey of engineering management and how you see it today evolving.
Yep. Before we talk about the evolution, I'll just share my thoughts about what does being an engineering manager or a leader means in general, and how is it very different from an IC. I get asked this question quite a lot. A lot of people, a lot of very strong ICs come to me with this question of, I want to become a manager, or can I become a manager, right? And this happens quite a lot in Bay Area as well as Bangalore.
Yeah.
So the first question I ask them is, why do you want to become a manager? Right? What are your reasons for it? I hear all great sorts of answers, right? Some folks generally come and say that, I like execution. I like to drive from front. I want to be the team leader sort of thing, right? I mean, all great answers, right? But if you think about it, execution, project management, Jira management, or leading from front, these are all characteristics of any technical leader, not just engineering manager. Even if you are a staff engineer or an architect or a principal engineer, uh, you are responsible for a reasonable degree of execution, project management, planning, mentorship, and getting things done, etc. After all, we are all evaluated by execution. So that is not a satisfactory answer for me. The main answer that I'm looking for is, I like to grow people. I want to see success in people that are around me. So as an engineering manager, it's quite a tricky role, because most of the time you are only as good as your team. You are evaluated by your team's progress, team's success, team's delivery. Until that point, most ICs are only responsible for their work, right? I mean, they're a project,
Yeah.
they do amazing work in their project, and most of the time they get fantastic ratings and materialistic benefits. But all of a sudden, when you become an engineering manager or leader, you are spending probably more number of hours to get things done, because you have to coordinate the rest of the team. But they don't necessarily translate to your growth or materialistic benefits, because you are only as good as an average person in your team. So the first thing people have to evaluate is, am I, or do I get happiness in growing others? If the answer is yes, if that's your P0, you are going to be a great engineering leader. Everything else will follow. Now, to the second question that you asked, this has been this remained constant across the years. From last 25 years, this is the number one characteristic of an engineering leader. Now, the evolution part, as the technology evolves, what I see as challenge is, an engineering manager should typically understand or go to a reasonable depth into people's work, technically, I mean. So, as the technology evolves, most of the engineering managers are typically 10 years, 15 years, 20 years experienced as ICs, right? Now,
Yeah.
most of this new engineering managers or seasoned engineering managers, they don't understand what technology evolution is. For example, all the recent advancements that we are seeing in AI, Gen AI, you know, the engineering managers have no clue about it. If the most of the time when there is bottom up innovation, how are engineering managers going to look at all of this and evaluate all of this from a technical standpoint? What this means is that there is a constant need for upskilling, and we'll talk about that, uh, you know,
Sure.
in your questions.
Yeah, but I think I would just like to ask one question here. I mean,
Mm,
I have been working with a lot of engineering managers in my career as well,
mm,
and I've been talking to a lot of them. There is always a debate around how much technical an engineering manager should be,
Yeah.
and I think that lies in a little more detail, and probably you could tell with some of your examples. An engineering manager who is working more on the product team and product side, uh, and an engineering manager who is probably involved in a platform team or maybe infrastructure team. I think things change a little bit. What's your thought on that part?
Yeah. So I think, good question, by the way. My general guidance to most engineering managers is, they have to be reasonably technical. I mean, it is just that they are given a different responsibility in the company, but that's it, right? it is not an excuse for them not being technical. Yes, they don't have to code 100% of the time, that is given, right? So how much time they should be spending coding or doing the technical design, it totally depends on the company, project, situation, etc., right? But they have to be technical. But you have a very interesting question around product teams versus platform teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, engineering manager for product teams generally, deals with a lot of stakeholders, whether it is PMs or customers or uh, the potential people and potential new customers that are going to the company. So their time is mostly spent there. They hardly have enough time to go deep within the product. That's the nature of their job. But at the same time, they are also expected to be reasonably technical, but not as technical as engineering leaders of platform teams or infrastructure teams. For the platform teams and infrastructure teams, yes, they also engage with stakeholders, but their stakeholders are mostly internal and other engineering managers. That's the general setup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just like how engineering managers are able to guide how the product should look like, platform managers and infrastructure managers should you know uh, go deep into what platform or infrastructure we should provide to the rest of the company. And obviously, as the problem statement sounds, that requires a lot more technical depth focus than the rest of the engineering leaders. So yes, engineering managers for platform and infrastructure are required to be reasonably technically stronger than the rest of the leaders.
Totally. I think that's the key here. And the balance is something that one needs to identify based on their situation, project, how much of things they need to take care of in their teams. So totally agree to it. Moving on, I think the most burning piece, I think everyone is talking about it, which is AI, agent AI, implementing AI into the most core legacy services in a team, in a company. But I think things need to be highlighted in a way where people need to understand what needs to be done, why
Mhm.
it needs to be done. And while you were talking few days back, you mentioned about mentoring a few startups and technical founders who are actually doing it at this point of time, and you're guiding them, and you have seen certain patterns where you feel that there is a guidance required in the industry now.
Yeah.
So while we have you here, my next question to you is like, what should an engineering manager do in this age of Gen AI to, let's say, stay technically equipped and take the right decisions moving forward?
Yeah. Um, I'll start with this. The first thing is upskilling, right? As we were talking about in our previous question, uh, most engineering managers have not coded in the Gen AI, right? Because it just started.
Yeah.
So, but all the new ideas or the new projects, there is a Gen AI or an AI flavor to it. That's where the world is moving towards. I mean, let's be honest, right? If we don't upskill ourselves in AI right now, we will be termed legacy. So when there is bottom up innovation happening within the team, how is the engineering manager supposed to, technically calibrate the project slash design slash code that is happening in the team? So that is why I say there is a need for upskilling. At Eightfold, what we did is one of our leader, he said, uh, all the engineering managers, let's not do anything for a week. Let's create something with Gen AI that is useful for the company, and all of you code it, right? I really love the idea because periodically engineering managers are supposed to step back like this, whether it is in the form of hackathons or ideas or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
They should get their hands dirty in the new tech to get some perspective. And once I did that, it gave me a totally new perspective, and I started seeing every idea with this new lens of Gen AI, right? And I started asking fundamental questions like, why can't we write an agent to do this? Why can't we do this? Should we spend a lot of time writing business logic for this, right? That is important for every engineering leader. How do you periodically step back and get your hands dirty and go to the roots? Sometimes it's not easy because of the commitments that you have. So you have to spend your weekends or or after time to go read about some of this, read some papers, write some code. Or it doesn't have to be something outside. It can be part of your projects too. Go pick up like 5 to 10% of your code in one of the projects. Get your hands dirty. So you will start being relevant, and the amount of confidence that you will get will automatically improve, and the kind of questions that you'll start asking for your immediate reporters will also change, and they will start seeing this too. They'll start feeling that my leader is reasonably technical and I can go and talk to him about anything. So this aspect is very, very important. Now coming to your second question, which is what are the common mistakes people are doing with this gen AI or this advancements of technologies? See, uh, Gen AI is great in terms of writing a lot of code behalf of an engineer, right? Writing a lot of monotonic code behalf of an engineer. But it is an evolving technology. It will have limitations. The fundamental mistake that I'm seeing a lot of people are doing is they're assuming that Gen AI or the LLMs can replace a lot of strong engineers. Maybe in the future, but that's not the case right now. They're great for prototyping. They're great for writing agents. They're great for automating some routine mundane tasks, right? And make your product agentic too. That's all great. They're moving with great velocity. But the thing is, there's a lot of difference between showing this initial prototype and productionizing this. Let's face it, enterprise customers have very high bar. They don't want something that breaks at scalability or reliability in production, right? Which means while LLM and agentic worlds offer a lot of fancy ways of doing things, you still need a solid engineering design practices around all of this to make sure that your product does not break in production. So that is where I spend a lot of time advising this new founders or people in large companies who are trying to adopt AI into their SDLC, that this is not going to be a magical replacement for everything that you guys are doing. It is, think of it as a friend who is going to assist you or improve your productivity by 10x. But everything around a solid engineering design or an organization, it's not a replacement for that, at least not yet.
Makes sense. I think I'll like to deep dive a little bit more on this piece itself, where if you could give us some example of how, so first of all, where you have seen these problems occurring, like
Mm.
people just going out and implementing AI or agents without even thinking whether it is going to make some sense or not.
Yeah,
And if you need to do it in the right way,
yeah,
can you give us some example? Like, okay, if this is a case, this is how one should proceed step by step. And I
yeah.
think I don't mind if you get a little more technical here, explaining what exactly needs to be done.
Yeah. So let's take a very basic product, right? Which any SaaS application, which has all the layers from infrastructure to authentication to product to some workflow that SaaS application is supposed to do. So in the non-agentic slash AI world, we are all familiar with how to do this, right? We probably do some microservices, we deploy them in Kubernetes or any other compute infrastructure that people are comfortable with. And we write tons and tons of business logic saying, if this is the request, do this. If this is the request, do this. That is the programming style we are used to, and that's still very popular. In the world of agents, agents can be thought of, an LLM abstraction where instead of writing a lot of business logic yourself, you have a set of tools that you author, typically the functions or utils that you call, you have in your microservices. And agents kind of decide what are the right set of tools to execute in order to get things done. The claim is there's a lot of time people spend in writing business logic and not the utils itself. So you write this utils slash tools one time and let agents do the business logic. That's okay. That's a very beautiful claim, right? But where it will fail is If you think about enterprise customers, yes, we'll talk about consumer applications, but let's talk about enterprise because that's where most of the immediate money is, right? Enterprise customers love determinism. So, for example, let's take an application like Jira or Asana or whatever application you want to think about, right? They expect a lot of determinism. So, let's say you move a Jira ticket from in progress to say completed. I mean, I'm taking Jira as an example because this is a common
Yeah.
enterprise product everybody is familiar with. So they expect it to work deterministically. Agents, as we know, are just wrappers around LLM, and they are still hallucinating models, right? So determinism is a question mark, right? Yes, we there are a lot of techniques and tools people are doing to improve the determinism factor, but if the determinism is 100%, it's as good as AI can do everything, right? It's never going to be the case. So we have to carefully pick and choose the parts of product which are okay to be non-deterministic. We'll talk about what they can be. And we obviously know the parts of product which cannot be non-deterministic. For example, all the permission boundaries, right? One of the common mistakes I see early startups doing is they just code permission boundaries with agents. So let's say given a logged in user, what are the permissions this person is supposed to have? We can't let agents guess that. It has to be deterministic. Because
Yeah.
what if there is a mistake and you start seeing your boss's salary, right? It's not acceptable. So similarly, permission boundaries, authentications, authorizations, anything in this layer, definitely no agents.
Okay.
Anything that has a strong deterministic workflow requirements, basically moving the state machines and moving from one state to another in a very deterministic way, definitely no agents. But
Got it.
there's a lot of parts of product where we can get away with not having deterministic code. It's okay to take one path versus the other. For example, uh, uh, how do I say? Let's say you have an agent, which is trying to act as uh, as a as a persona. Let me put it that way. So one of the common example I can take is, let's say you are trying to use Jira, and somebody is trying to generate some reports with Jira, right? So think of it as offline reporting. So whether you do report number 1, 2, 3, or whether you do report number 3, 2, 1 in different order, it's okay. Nobody's going to, nobody's going to make a big deal about it. So you get the idea, right? So anywhere there is acceptability in terms of non-determinism, okay to code agents so that you will reduce on the time you're spending on the business logic. But anywhere you need determinism, you definitely have to have solid code which obeys, the rules of determinism.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a very good example to explain where things can be implemented and where you need to be a little cautious. I think one more thing that comes to my mind is that every time you're implementing something, uh, talking in terms of AI, uh, you also need to show the results,
Yeah.
right? Say if I implement GitHub Copilot in my team, I need to make sure the coding standards are improving, or at least the speed of writing the code is improving. There are lesser performance issues. There are lesser, let's say, vulnerabilities or security issues. So similarly, I think at Eightfold or at any other startup where you are an advisor, do you see these implementations happening and people consciously measuring whether things are improving or not, or they're just going by the thing that okay, if it's the age of AI, let's implement and do it, and everything is all positive. They're not looking at results, they're not measuring. And if they are, how are they measuring? Can you again give an example and help us understand?
Yeah. So I think I've seen both styles. The answer to this largely relies on the influence of founders and technical leaders within the team. For example, Eightfold is an AI company. Most of the leaders in Eightfold are from strong AI backgrounds. So even before Gen AI, they know how to evaluate a model and how to make sure that AI is doing its job. So that goodness will continue even in the Gen AI world. Right? Typically, people do this with eval frameworks, right? They log
Okay.
everything that is done by AI, and they kind of understand if what percentage of it is accurate, right? I mean, they can start with something simple and we can take it all the way fancy. But yes, there are many companies where founders or technical leaders have not worked or they don't understand AI a lot, right? I mean, they're still upskilling just like all of us,
Totally. Yeah.
and they don't know how to really evaluate how good of a job AI is doing, right? I mean, they are just checking their box saying that yes, I have agents, yes, I'm using AI, yes, I'm using LLMs and whatnot, right? So that's where the danger is. And that's where I spend a lot of time advising them that you should have a solid framework around observability to understand, you know, how much of these decisions are accurate, what part, how much of your productivity is getting a boost, right? Totally, right. I think people are now upskilling. That's where I spend a lot of time educating this new age founders, especially the ones who does not have the AI background, to help them understand that you need to have strong eval frameworks to understand accuracy and use of this AI for everything that you're doing. And I see a huge, improvement in their understanding over time.
Perfect. Anything specific that you would like to mention here in terms of your evaluation frameworks for AI that could really help the larger audience to maybe approach things fundamentally?
Oh, I mean, so there are ton of eval frameworks in the internet, right? I mean, pick a basic one, nothing fancy. Especially, I mean, obviously it depends on the size of your project and the impact of your AI model. Things can change significantly. But for most of the agents that people are developing in house, pick a very simple eval framework. I mean, if I see a lot of people are using LangGraph and Langsmith nowadays, right? I mean, I'm not married to a framework. People are free to use any framework, but a Langsmith is a good example of what observability in the Gen AI world should look like, right? So they're nicely logging all the conversations that we are doing with LLM, and you can start looking at the impact of each of this conversation, and over time you will start understanding whether to tweak your prompt or start providing more context, or maybe build a rag around it. The whole idea is to understand your interactions with AI, because these are all headless agents, right? These are not GPT like conversations where a user is trying to enter this conversation. Your product is doing this on behalf of you. So, which means you are not actually seeing what is happening in terms of interactions with this LLM. So, having this eval frameworks will, kind of nicely log everything that we're doing with LLM, and we can start observing what to do in order to improve the accuracy and get better results. That's the first idea. So I would I would
Correct.
start with Langsmith, and people can get a lot of ideas from Langsmith. And yes, we can go all fancy from there.
Great. I think before we complete this discussion and say a goodbye to you, I think one important thing that comes to my mind is that implementing AI in any tech organization, there could be various areas, various dimensions where you can take it to. But anything that you think is kind of proven already, where people should invest, engineering managers should invest like blindly. Okay, this is something that we can pick and like see the impact and improve the overall engineering efficiency.
Yes, I generally recommend people to start with internal productivity, because it is not customer facing A. So you are okay to do experiments and fail, and it will give a nice headway for people within the company to upskill for agentic worlds. There are ton of problems, right? Whether it is, I mean, I have a simple goal: 10% of my PRs that are generated within the company should be AI generated. It looks like a very big number, but if you think about it, you can all the unit tests can be written by AI. All the PagerDuty problems can be taken a first shot by agents and rise simple PRs, right? There are ton of internal things that we can just do with agents. Now, agents are becoming very good at code writing and code generation. Obviously, there are still limitations, but for simple things like unit tests, bugs, failures, agents can definitely take a first shot at it. That's one. And second thing is, if we think about all this retro documents, internal confluence documents, or bunch of non-productive things that a lot of engineering people do, right? Uh, Agents can do it without getting any boredom, right? I mean, think about it. You don't need to pay any salaries for agents, right? They can continuously work for you. They'll automate and do all the repetitive and mundane tasks. But in this process, as we're talking about, we should start learning this eval frameworks and improve the accuracy of this internal agents, and thereby, because internal agents are easy to measure, right? 10% of my PRs, my bugs have reduced this much by year, month over month. Bugs as in the overall bugs will not reduce. The number of bugs that a developer had to fix versus an agent had to fix, that will reduce over time, right? So these are very simple metrics to measure and and improve on the agent's accuracy. Once you have this solid understanding, engineers are the best people. They have fantastic product context. So they will start looking at gaps. Oh, I can put an agent here. I can put an agent here. Maybe I can do an
Yes,
agent for this part in the product. Right? That's the natural evolution I recommend people. I don't recommend people to start agents in the product directly.
makes sense. Great. I think, Suresh, this was a really interesting session. We got some very practical advice around implementing AI and avoiding the pitfalls. Uh, Anything else that you would like to say to our audience as parting advice?
Yeah. So I'm sure there are a lot of technical audience that are going to see this. Uh, Upskill yourself in agents or AI in general. Uh, I think 5 years ago, it was probably not seen as a requirement. There are a group of people who were doing AI and generating models, and majority of the world was just doing backend slash full stack engineering. But right now, the definition of a full stack engineer has changed completely, right? So a full stack engineer is now writing agents, right? So it doesn't have to be fine tuning your models or going into the depth of models, right? That is still models experts job, you know. But at least learning to write programs using agents and incorporating agents as a first class citizen in your projects, definitely spend a lot of time on that.
Great. Thank you so much. That's our time for today. Pleasure having you.
Thank you. Bye bye.